Hello everyone, my name is Michaela Story. Welcome to my YouTube channel and welcome to my first video. I'm going to be talking about true crime while I do my makeup. This was inspired by Bailey Sarian. She is a YouTuber. She does her makeup while she talks about true crime cases, dark history, things like that. And I thought that was really cool, so I'm gonna give this a try because I love makeup and I find true crime cases very interesting. Now, I am not an expert on anything. I'm not an expert on any of the cases that I will talk about. I'm not an expert in makeup either. It's a hobby of mine. I never went to school or anything for makeup. But I do enjoy it. And I figured why not combine them just like Bailey does and try and start a YouTube channel. So today we will be talking about Robert Pickton. If you don't know who he is, then you're about to learn. Now, warning, this case does have graphic detail. It talks about rape and murder and torture and cannibalism. And these are things that you are uncomfortable with. Please don't watch this video. It is a very disturbing video. So yeah, and this is not for children whatsoever. So please don't let your children watch this video, or please don't watch this video around your children. It's not a topic that little ears should hear. Okay, so Robert Pickton. He was born October 24th, 1949. And he was born to Leonard and Louise Pickton, who were a family of farmers. And Robert was born in Port Coquitlam in Vancouver, in Canada. So this is a Canadian serial killer that we are going to talk about. Now, Robert had a brother, David. In different sources, it was said that he was his older brother, and some say he was his younger brother. So I am just going to say that Robert is the middle child, okay? David is his older brother, and he also had a younger sister, Linda, who at the age of, I believe, 12, ended up moving with relatives in Vancouver City because she couldn't handle living on the pig farm anymore. It was just disgusting and she didn't want to live that lifestyle anymore, so she basically disowned her family. She was just like, see ya. Now, Louise, Robert's mother, she cared more about the farm and the pigs than she did her own sons, okay? The boys from a very young age worked on the farm. Sometimes they would even miss school because they had to work on the farm. Feed the pigs in the morning, feed the pigs in the afternoon, feed the pigs late at night. She really just saw her boys as like farm hands. Now, one thing that had happened to Robert was that he had a traumatic birth. The umbilical cord was wrapped around his neck, okay, and it just wasn't a good birth. It wasn't. And then also when he was 2 years old, his mother, because she wanted him to stop crying every night, for a year, he lived in the chicken coop. Yep, you heard that right. 2-year-old little baby boy was put into the chicken coop because she didn't want to hear him crying. Robert says that he remembers pulling up the floorboards in the chicken coop to drink the water that was in the stream that was running underneath the chicken coop. Yeah. That's just like a horrible thing to do to any child. Even this is Robert Pickton, right? I don't feel sorry for the man he is today. What I do feel sorry about is the little boy, the child, right? Because, like, it's a child. Now, Louise did not care about hygiene at all. She did not. The Pickton boys would have a bath once a week, if that. And Louise treated her animals like part of the family. So pigs, cows, dogs, all of their animals would have free range inside their house. Yes. So there would be manure, there would be feces, just like all out through the house. Yeah. And they didn't clean or anything. It was said that if the Picktons were coming into town to buy groceries and stuff like that, that people could smell them before they saw them, which that is very gross. Very, very gross. And it wasn't just like regular like body odor. It is like feces, manure, because their clothes were disgusting, right? And mixed with their body odor. And it was said that it was also kind of hard to tell Louise apart from her husband because they dressed in very similar clothes, and she had like facial hair and stuff like that. And that really the only difference between them was that she wore like a apron over her work clothes. But yeah, so the Pickton boys, the Pickton brothers, had not an easy childhood. And in school, they were bullied. They would be called stinky piggies because of their hygiene. They were very, very stinky. So yeah, but David did have more friends than Robert. David was more of the outgoing one, and he was able to make friends, where Robert, he was more of a loner. Now, when Robert was about 12, 13, he was in his early teens, okay? He had saved up money to buy himself a baby calf. And it was his pet. He loved her so much. And every day after school, he would race home to take care of his baby calf. He would feed it, wash it. It was his best friend. Okay? Now one day, after school, Robert came home to feed his calf. But when he got there, the pen was empty, and he searched and searched and searched. He came back to the pen and realized that the pen was still locked though, which means someone would have had to take out the baby calf and then relock the door. So he went inside. Now, from two different sources, it said that his father told him to go look in the barn, and the other source said that his mother told him to go look in the barn. So I'm not sure which one it was, but one of his parents told him, "Oh, go look in the barn." So, fearing the worst, Robert went and checked out the barn, and strung up by the ankles and gutted was his baby calf. They had butchered his calf. And Robert was devastated. He did not talk to anyone. He was just absolutely devastated. Shortly after that, he dropped out of high school, which his mom was kind of just like, "Oh, that's fine, and now you have more time to work on the farm." That's all she really cared about. So from the year of 1963 to 1970, this is shortly after he got dropped out of school, he got a apprenticeship at a butchery. And so, 14, 15 years old, starting to work in a butcher house and butchering livestock. Okay? He worked there for a few years, and then he started being the butcher for his family's farm, which Louise thought was amazing because now she didn't have to outsource all their pigs being slaughtered. She just had Robert there all day slaughtering the pigs. So every single day, for hours of the day, he would just slaughter and gut pigs, okay? Which I've heard from like different articles and stuff is that when that happens, it's kind of like people who are butchers like need counseling and stuff like that, because like it like desensitizes you from taking like an animal life, and it's just like constant killing and constant blood and just like all of this horrible stuff, okay? Now, shortly after that, it was in 1978, his father got fairly sick and he ended up passing away, which was not ideal because he was like the main person that like took care of the farm and everything like that. The Pickton's pig farm was like the best pork in Canada at the time. It was like, you want pork, you get it from the Pickton farm. They had the best pork. Now, shortly after Leonard died, Louise started getting sick. And so Robert, he adored his mother. Even though his mother was not a very loving or caring person, he adored her. So when she got sick, he was the one that was there. He was the one that was taking care of her. He was the one that was like feeding her and changing her diapers and dressing her. He was the one that was there. And she ended up passing away a year after Leonard had passed away. Now, when she passed away, Robert was devastated because he, like I said, he loved his mother. But it was just, I don't know, it was not a very healthy relationship that he had with his mom. It just wasn't. But when like both his parents passed away, the farm was inherited by the Pickton children. Linda still wanted nothing to do with the farm. She was just like, no, I've been gone for X amount of years already. I don't want anything to do with it. David took the house, and Robert ended up taking a trailer that was like on an isolated part of the property. It was a very big property. So the Pickton farm was about 27 kilometers east of Vancouver, which for all you Americans is 17 miles. So it's just like on the outskirts of Vancouver, okay? Vancouver, BC, if I didn't already say that. Let's see. When Robert was 13, he had met this girl called named Leanne. I'm pretty sure her name was Leanne. I couldn't re-find the source material to where I first originally heard her name, but I'm pretty sure it was Leanne. If I'm wrong, if I find out that I'm wrong, I will correct it in the comments below, but I believe her name was Leanne. So Robert was 13 at the time and Leanne was 5. Leanne was very similar to Robert, where she was kind of like an outcast, you know, a loner. She, when she was 5 years old, she went to the Pickton farm with her grandparents, who she was living with, to buy the pork. And Robert, remember just like seeing her and like feeling a connection with her, because he was just like, oh, she's like me. She's sad and lonely. And so he gave her a bag of sausages. It might have been hot dogs, but I'm pretty sure it was just like pork sausages. And Leanne said that this like really stuck out to her because like no one was ever like really nice to her. So she like held that with her. So years later, when they're an adult, they end up meeting again. And she was just like, oh my goodness, like best friend here. Like, she did not care that Robert was stinky and smelly and awkward and bizarre. She would, like, they had this odd relationship. It wasn't a sexual relationship, but they would go to bed together and just like cuddle, and she would just be there. And she was like this hardened, rough and tough, I think, biker chick, you know. So she would just, you know, hang out with Robert. Like, yeah, he's my friend. Okay. Now, it's unclear when Robert started picking up sex workers, but it was said that it was probably about like 1975, so like mid to late 70s, and it's assumed that he started killing in the early 80s. However, none of that is clarified, so we don't really know. That is just an like speculation of when he started to kill and when he started to pick up sex workers. Now, on March 23rd, 1997, Robert was arrested and charged with the attempted murder of Wendy Esther. This is her name. Anyways, I'll just refer to her as Wendy. Wendy was a sex worker, and Robert went downtown to pick up a sex worker, and he was just like, hey, you know, I'll give you 200. Oh no. I'll give you $200, you know, to, you know, have sex with me. And so she had a drug habit, and that was something that money that she could not turn down. So she was just like, okay, I'll do it, fine. And so he was just like, okay. He takes her back to his house, and she said that there was just like not a mattress, like a sleeping bag on the ground, but that he did offer to wear a condom, that she was thankful about. So they did intercourse, only lasted like 5 minutes, and then she went into the bathroom to shoot up, but she was very just like uneasy and distracted, and she ended up missing her vein, so it was just like a waste of drugs. And so she was just like getting irritated and agitated, and she was just like, hey Robert, can I, like, you know, use your phone to call my boyfriend? And he was just like, no, but you can check the phone book there and I'll drop you off somewhere with a payphone. And she's like, okay, cool. Pause 1 second, I need to do my eyeliner. Okay, so she was just like, okay, cool, I'll use your phone book. So she has her back towards him, and she's just like looking through the phone book, trying to find the number for the hotel that her boyfriend's staying in. And all of a sudden, she feels something on her left wrist. Robert had taken out a pair of handcuffs and quickly slipped it on her left wrist. She turned around and was looking at him in his eyes, and she knew right then and there that she was face to face with the serial killer. Because there had already been lots of you know, rumors and speculation that there's a serial killer, there's girls going missing, but at the time the police didn't really care, because there was like, you know, sex workers are off the street, sex workers disappear, they come and go, blah blah blah. No one took the missing report seriously. But when she turned around, she knew right then and there that she was face to face with the serial killer. And so, you know, instincts, fight or flight, and she chose to fight. My girl Wendy fought hard, and she found a knife on the counter. She grabbed it, but in her haste, she grabbed the blade of the knife instead of like the handle. So she sliced her hand, but then she tried to stab Robert, and she was able to stab him like in the neck. He got the knife from her, and he stabbed her in the stomach, and her guts like came out like her intestines were like hanging out and stuff. Like he had really slashed her stomach. And he was about to kill her when he passed out from the loss of blood from the wound that she inflicted. So she grabbed the knife, she grabbed her stomach, and she just started running. But again, mind you, she is very far away from like the closest town, right? So she's just running and running, feeling helpless and scared, and she's getting dizzy because she's losing blood. But then thankfully, the neighbors, who were like an older couple, were like driving home, and she's like flagging them down, and she's covered in blood, and she's holding a knife, and it's like this crazy scene, okay? And the car finally stops and reverses and comes back to her, and they end up helping her. They get her to a hospital. They called 911, explained the situation. So Robert ended up getting picked up by an ambulance, and they ended up being at the same hospital. They both were at the Eagle Ridge Hospital. Now, police were called, and they're taking statements, and Robert, he's just like, no, she's lying, that didn't happen. Actually, what happened was that I realized that she stole my wallet after like giving me a blowjob. She must have pulled it out of my pocket when my pants were down. That's why I attacked her. But thankfully, the injuries that they had lined up with Wendy's story instead of Robert's story. And also, they found the key to the handcuffs inside Robert's pocket. So he was arrested and accused of the attempted murder. However, I believe he got out on bond for $2,000 during that time. But unfortunately, in January of 1998, the charges were dropped because the prosecution thought that Wendy was an unreliable source because she was like a sex worker and a drug addict and stuff. So charges were dropped, and Robert walked free and was able to continuing murdering. Yes. Now, in 1996, so sorry, I'm backtracking a little bit. I forgot to mention this before, Wendy. But in 1996, the brothers, they opened the Piggy Palace Society, and it was supposed to be for like hosting like special events and concerts and stuff like that. But what the brothers did was they converted one of their slaughterhouses into like this party space, and they had people like sex workers, drug addicts, the Hells Angels, like, and these parties would have like up to 2,000 people, okay? And during this time, Robert would take meat out of his freezer, okay, and he would feed it to people at these parties. After a while, these people were just like, you know what, this meat doesn't look right. It's not white like pork is supposed to look. This looks, dark and stringy and tastes weird and stuff. And so people started only eating like the full pigs, like over a fire. That's what people would eat. Anything that came out of Robert's freezer, they're just like, I don't know how I feel about that. I'm just like not gonna eat that. Yeah, so the Piggy Palace was formed in 1996. Wendy's attack was 1997, and then in 1998 is when the case was dropped against Robert, but also Port Coquitlam authorities sued the Pickton brothers for not using their non-profit society properly, and they were just like, oh, you're not supposed to be, treating it like this. You're not supposed to be throwing these huge parties. You're not supposed to have a slaughterhouse like that either. And so they were sued, but the Pickton brothers still ended up having a huge New Year's party in 1998. But finally it was like shut down and everything. But at these before it was shut down, like at these parties and stuff, like I mentioned, the Hells Angels were there, right? And it ended up being like a chop shop. So like the Hells Angels would like steal cars, and the Pickton brothers would like chop the cars, and then like resell them. And so they were like more focused on that than they were the farm. So that's when people started realizing that like the quality of the meat was like going down, and like it was never the same once Lorenzo and Louise passed away, so it was just like the farm itself wasn't doing very good. And now the Piggy Palace was closed down, and they weren't allowed to have any more parties. And it was said that if they had parties, like anybody that would be there would be arrested, and it was like this huge thing. Now, this gentleman named Bill Hitchcocks, he was a former worker on the farm, and he said that Robert was just like very bizarre. His behavior was bizarre, and he just, didn't know how he felt about Robert. And also that there were like illegal guns, firearms on the property. And so, in February 6, 2002, there was a search warrant for the Pickton's farm for illegal firearms. And it was an anonymous source. However, I think it was Bill Hitchcocks that did it. But the police went and they seized illegal firearms. And so because they were able to see the firearms, they did a second warrant. And the brothers were arrested, and there was a second warrant, and during the second warrant, they found items of missing women. Okay? They found items of missing women. Okay? Now, the brothers ended up being released, but Robert was put under surveillance. Was put under surveillance. Even though, there had been already like a charge against him that was dropped about him attacking Wendy and stuff. Like, I don't know. I just don't think the authorities did a very good job during this time. They didn't take like the missing sex workers, stuff seriously. Even though there had been rumors for years that Robert was mistreating sex workers and that women were going missing after like going home with Robert, and it just, just wasn't good. There could have been more done, and if there was more done, Robert probably wouldn't have so many victims. Now, on February 22nd, 2002, Robert was arrested and charged with 2 counts of murder. You heard me. He finally was convicted of murder. Yep. Mind you, this is 2002. Okay, he's been killing since the early 80s. Alright, that is a long time to be killing. So his first victim that he was charged with was Serena Abbotsway, 29, reported missing August 21st, 2001. The second count was Mona Wilson, 26. She went to the doctor November 30th, 2001, reported missing that night. Then on April 2nd, 2002, 3 more were added to his charge. Andrea Josbury, 22, last seen June 2001, reported missing June 8, 2001. Bren and Wolf, 32, last seen February 1999, reported missing April 25th, 2000. And then Maureen Leafry, last seen August 1997, reported missing December 29th, 1997. So these were the first 5 that he was charged with. And the ones that he was finally convicted with were these 5 plus Georgia Pine, last seen January 1999 and reported missing 2001. So those were the 6 that he was convicted of. However, there was 20 more women that he was charged with, but later on August 4th, 2010, these charges were stayed. Here is the list of their names. So these women were also his victims, but I guess it's just like not enough evidence or, you know, stuff like that. But at least he was charged and convicted with the 6 murders, the first 6, and he was sentenced to prison for life. Now, there's also a few more that Pickton is implicated in the murders. Mary Clark, also known as Nancy Greek, 25, last seen 1991, from downtown Victoria. Yvonne Bon, 32, last seen March 16, 2001, reported missing March 21st, 2001. Dawn Carey, reported missing December 2000. And then 2 Jane Does. These women were also suspected that are Robert's victims. One of the things I forgot to mention, that's why my makeup is all done. I'm going to insert this part into the video, but here is a clip of Robert after he was arrested for the 6 murders. There was an undercover police officer as his cellmate, and Robert had given information about the women that he had killed. So here's the clip.
What do you got? You know what I'm saying? Yeah, I know what's up. You got a missing person. We better look at how you made it. I found that that's good. It's supposed to something. Take in the ocean. Any better than that. No. That's good. Pretty good. Hey? Too much left.
That's what I was talking about. Feel the serious with the antifreeze, and you check yourself, and you're dead better than 10 minutes. That was just one more even bigger than ladies, bigger than months in the States.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
This is already about 40.
Okay, so as you can see, that was a very intense clip. He talked about wanting to do a full 50 and he had only got to 49 because he got sloppy, but that also was used against him to convict him. So yeah, so back to the video. Okay, so I have told you his upbringing, right? I've told you the women that he's been convicted of and accused of murdering. Now we are going to talk about some of the rumors that happened, some of the things that came out after he had been convicted. So one night, Robert had 2 sex workers at his house, okay? One of the girls woke up in the middle of the night. Robert and the other girl weren't there, and she saw that the light in the barn was on, and she's just like, oh, why is that on? And where is everyone? I'm gonna go take a look. And so she did just that. She went to the barn, and she stopped. She stopped dead in her tracks because what she saw scared her so bad, and she was unsure if this is actually what she was seeing. But what she saw was that the other girl that was there was now strung up by her ankles, hanging from the ceiling, and Robert was standing there, covered in blood, with a knife. He had gutted her like a pig. Her guts were hanging out, and he had gutted her. He walked over to the other girl. She was crying. She was saying, all I want was drugs. That's all I want. I won't tell anyone. You don't have to worry. I'm not going to say anything. And he let her go. And so she came forward after Robert was already like convicted and stuff, and she was just like, hey, this happened. I can't get the image of red painted toes out of my mind, because she says that's what she saw, was like red painted toes strung up by these huge hooks. Okay, now also what had come out was that, you remember how I said that Robert had like pig meat in his freezer, okay, that he would like give people, that he would feed at his parties, all that kind of stuff. Well, there was this one a couple incidents where like there were like these construction workers, and they had done some work on the Pickton farm, and Robert went to his freezer and got out meat, and he was just like, here's a pork roast for all your work. And they were just like, oh, sweet, you know, and they took it home, they looked at it, and, you know, it was kind of odd looking, and they cooked it up, and it did not look like pig meat. And so they chose not to eat it, and they threw it away. They were just like, this is like a sickly pig or something else, but it's not pork. That's not what it is. We don't know what this is. So they chose not to eat it. At all these wild parties that the Picktons would throw, Robert would make the meat from his freezer, and he would serve it. Now, the people there were just like, you know, this doesn't look right, it doesn't taste right, it's dark and stringy, and so people stopped eating the meat from his freezer and would only eat, like the full pigs that are like roasting over the fires, okay? Now, there were a couple girls that said that they were at the Pickton farm, and that one night they had, Robert had cooked some pork, and they thought it was very strange looking, and they chose not to eat it, and they chose not to eat any more meat from the farm. But once all of this came out, they realized that around the same time that they like had this weird meat was the same time that their cousin had gone missing, and their cousin was one of the Robert's victims. So they think that they actually ate their cousin, which is like horrifying. Okay, it's unclear if Robert actually ate any of his own victims, but he still partaked in cannibalism because he got other people to eat his victims. Let's see. There were times that Robert had you know, he would just give away the pork. He would, the pork, okay? But it turns out that Robert would kill his victims, butcher them like a pig, cut the best slabs of meat from his victims, and he would like grind some up and mix it with actual pork. So he had like ground pork with human flesh, okay? And sometimes he would give the remains to his pigs. He buried some jawbones on his property, which also helped with the investigation of convicting him, because those were tested for DNA and matched to missing people. But his main source of how he got rid of his victims were rendering plants. You might be like, Michaela, what's a rendering plant? I don't know what a rendering plant is. Well, a rendering plant was where farmers and butchers would bring the remains of their animals that they did not need. And these sites turned animal, you know, the animal waste, not animal waste, but like the wasted parts of the animal that like the farmers and butchers didn't need, they would turn it into gelatin and stuff, the kind of things that you would find in gummy bears and lipsticks and just like everyday items. So he disposed of his victims at these rendering sites, okay? So the remains of up to 49 women, possibly more, we don't know, possibly more, ended up with these rendering plants. So if you lived in the Vancouver area around this time, you might have consumed human remains. I live in this area. That's not cool. Yeah. So that's how he would get rid of his victims. So he would butcher them. He would first rape them, then he would slaughter them like he would do his pigs. And then he would cut the best meat, he would grind up the meat, he would feed some to his pigs, he buried it on his property, and disposed of it at these rendering plants. So, that is the story of Robert Pickton. Crazy serial killer, crazy individual, bizarre behavior, and all that stuff. Now, there's a lot more to this case. However, I just wanted to cover like the main points of this case, okay? And so you can obviously look it up yourself and read more details. There's a lot more details that I didn't mention, but if I was to talk about every single thing, this would be a very, very long video, okay? But I want you to really think about it. One thing that I find very interesting is like, why do serial killers kill? Why do like criminals do the things they do, okay? Now, Robert, he had a traumatic birth. His umbilical cord was wrapped around his neck and he didn't get oxygen right away. Now, if you look at lots of different serial killers, there's always like some sort of head injury involved. And so, or like they have like a horrible childhood and stuff like that. So I want you to ask yourself, is it nurture or nature? If Robert had a different upbringing, if he didn't have a traumatic birth, if he didn't live in a chicken coop, if he had a loving mother, if he had a good education, and he wasn't around death all the time, like the slaughtering of animals from a young age, do you think Robert would have been a normal person in society? Or do you think that It's in his nature. But I want to know what you guys think. Let me know if it's nurture or nature, or if you believe it's both. Let me know in the comments. Let me know what other cases that you would like me to cover. Again, I am not an expert on any of these topics. I'm not an expert in makeup either. I just like to play around with my makeup. I think it's fun. If you have like tips on how I could do my makeup better, I am open to that. However, I will not respond to any negative comments. I don't need that in my life, okay? All positivity. I hope you guys all have a great day and stay safe out there because the world is a crazy place. Okay? Bye. See you in the next video.